Hello, I'm Michelle.
And I'm Laura, and this is the Parentrepreneurs Club podcast, a fortnightly show to help you navigate the demands of being both a parent and a business owner. We will share lots of practical ideas, hints and tips, and our own and others' experiences of juggling work, family, health and finances. Above all, we want to help you find your purpose, define your identity, and banish any confidence gremlins that might be holding you back from the life you dream of. No matter whether you have children or not, there will be something here for you. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Laura.
Hi, and I'm Michelle.
We want to talk to you a little bit about one of the techniques that we use in coaching. So something I frequently use at the start of any coaching conversation is around the communication model, which is a NLP technique. It's built around one of the NLP foundations, which is the principle of the map is not the territory. And we'll explain that in a little bit more detail and our kind of interpretation of that as well. But I mean, is that something you use as well, Michelle, the communication model?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my own personal style, I tend to try and understand from individuals what their natural response is and the way they respond to an event, and then we put the model against that so people can really understand it. I think sometimes just knowing the audience, isn't it? We always find this. Some individuals are really model obsessed, and I think once I certainly know when I did this in an NLP training, the penny just dropped. And the model itself is quite powerful to see and actually to see it as a visual, which we can probably share at the end of this podcast as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think you're absolutely right. We get hung up on theory sometimes, but it is about understanding actually how our brain works. And I've listened to loads of different kind of authors and people that talk about this, and I know Derren Brown talks about system 1 and system 2 brains, but it is that actual process of how we delete, distort, and generalize information. So my my understanding is that when an event happens, we naturally process something like 2 million pieces of data at once through all our senses. So even if you think of if you're in a busy coffee shop and having a conversation, we do this so many times when you focus in on each other, because you're listening to what the other person's saying, and actually you probably miss out everything else that's going on around you. And I had it fairly recently where someone said, "Oh, I was waving at you and that you didn't see me." And it's because of that deleting the external data and focusing on one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all hone into those senses so differently as well, don't we? I drive my husband absolutely insane because he's like, you touch everything. When you go shopping, you touch absolutely everything. I'm like, and I never realised it until I did NLP. I just thought that's who I am and that's just part and parcel of it. I suppose the psychology student in me, I had an awareness of it. But yeah, this model kind of really finesses that, doesn't it? And I know we've had conversations when you certainly sit there and you kind of put those senses behind it and you really kind of truly understand, just general conversations you have, not necessarily coaching conversations with people, but people you meet from a family perspective. If you go out for dinner with friends, you just naturally can see, like, if someone orders a bottle of wine, what the go-to is, what their sense is. It's like, I really want one that's going to taste like this, or I really want one. And when people smell the wine, as opposed to just picking the cheapest on the menu or feeling the bottle like I might do. It can be applied in so many ways, can't it? Just the pure basics in the sense of the sensory piece that we have, those things that are one of those parts of that communication model.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're kind of touching on another aspect there, but in terms of the actual the 5 senses, if you think of everything that's going on in one process, you say, if you tasting a glass of wine, it's what does that taste like? What sounds are going on around you, and you have this internal perception of what's happened before. So perhaps when you ordered that bottle of wine last time, you might recall the memory of when you last drank it, which will have alter that perception, your experience of it. So that's why we're saying when we delete, distort and generalize, we might say a distortion might be the last time I had this, you know, it tasted completely different. But
Yeah.
our memory is something of perhaps being, you know, in a really nice restaurant on a date or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
And that's a different circumstance to where we're in now. So we
Yeah.
distort that memory
Yeah.
or the experience of
Absolutely.
that wine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes in, and you don't quite appreciate how that external piece, when it goes in and you say those 2 million bits of data, how they actually then filter through that brain and all those different components, isn't it? I mean, if you just crudely put it without thinking about the model, how many times do you say, you know, it's about the way it feels, it's that value piece, isn't it? It's that alignment, that things have happened before and you just have that feeling that you know. And that
Yeah.
is part of that filter, isn't it, that happens, you know, one of those pieces that you contribute to it, those memories, those values that you hold. It's all about that validity, isn't it? And I think sometimes we all feel that, but until you start looking at it in an NLP model, it's very difficult to translate. And sometimes it's that aha moment, isn't it, when you bring this model to life for people. It's like, that's exactly why I do that.
Absolutely, yeah. And our brains, they're not rational.
No,
So
exactly.
even with
Right.
things like distortion, I mean, one of the most ridiculous things that I do is when my husband's away, I hate closing the window blinds or closing
Yeah.
curtains because I'm sure there's someone outside, and my brain will
Yeah.
actually tell me there
Yeah.
is someone there, even
Yeah.
though I know there's
Yeah.
not. But then I start to see
Absolutely.
things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that is a distortion that's happening that is not a
Absolutely.
rational thing.
No, no. And it's those memories that go into play with that as well, isn't it? Sometimes it's the memories that sit behind it, that you're recollecting something, and it's how you deal with that memory, or how you maybe haven't dealt with that memory, and how it manifests then.
Absolutely, yeah. I think one of the other key things is the generalization as well,
Yeah.
and we, you know, what we'll tend to do is recall past memories of things that have happened to us. So I know this frequently from a HR perspective, in that if you say to someone on a Friday, "Can I see you in my office?"
Yeah.
that whole piece of, oh, the last time that somebody called me into an office on Friday was really bad news, or I was in trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that generalization of, oh my God, why am I being called into the office? It must be something
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And we do that in all areas of life
Yeah.
elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
It, even, you know, to things where I've had conversations with my husband, and you know, you have that, oh well, you always do it that way,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we generalize,
Yeah.
you know,
We
on
assume
things
it's
that
the
they've done before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I said to you before, it's like the wet towels in the bathroom on the floor. We you know, we'll assume they're on the floor every morning in the bathroom, as opposed to thinking they've been picked up. The generalization happens, and the way that input goes into your brain, and then the way you behave to that, because that generalization is what affects that output come behavior, doesn't it? You
Yeah,
know.
it does. Yeah, and even, you know, with the deletion side of it as well, in
Yeah,
deleting data that we don't want to hear. So
absolutely. Yeah,
language plays a huge part
yeah,
in what we actually hear. So feedback
yeah,
is a great example. When someone's telling you something, we're naturally
yeah,
programmed to focus on negative anyway,
yeah,
but we will delete the bits that we think either
yeah,
are uncomfortable, or
yeah.
you know, the positive bits, and focus on the negative.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And certainly when we have our HR hats on, that's why it's so important in the messaging that we do for line managers and business owners, like the language you put behind some of that stuff, because yeah, that deletion is so powerful. Or you know, we kind of like to think that the information's there when we've misunderstood it. It's kind of it's that brain playing that trick, isn't it? And we all feel it sometimes. We think, oh, you know, why am I doing that? Or why did they say that? Well, they didn't actually say it, and it's minuted, and it might be even recorded. But you like to admit that part, because it's like you say, it's the brain doing that natural deletion piece. I think sometimes I've said to people I've coached over the years, if you go back, if we sit from where we were 2 weeks ago, when you go back, they can all recall things that have happened within those 2 weeks where they've had that conversation, and they'll articulate it to me, and I'll say, you know, there's two sides to every story. And I think that's a really good thing in NLP sometimes, because your brain does filter out so much of that stuff. And if I say to somebody, well, what was the recollection of that conversation? What do you think their recollection would be? it's vastly different sometimes, and it is because we're literally input, the thing goes in, we're processing that, and then the way we act to that and the behavior that comes out is, like you say, we're either deleting some of it, we're making those generalizations, and it can be very different from the conversation from the person on the other side of the table. And it's quite
Absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah, it is. I think, it's funny because I love police dramas and watching TV, and I think when you see a police interrogating someone, they always say there's that three versions of the truth. There's my story, your story, and then what actually happened.
Absolutely.
And we see it in the HR perspective of when we're doing mediations or dealing with investigations. There's always, like you said, two sides to every story. And somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Absolutely. It's all that stuff that gets thrown into the mix, isn't it? It's your beliefs, your values that you hold, the things that have happened before, those memory pieces, all those things are at play, aren't they? And no matter how sophisticated the brain can become, that subconscious things happens. Even if you can try and overcome it in conversation, sometimes you have those coaching sessions and then that aha moment happens, and it's like, I understand that now. That's exactly what I've done, because that happened 5 years ago and I had that conversation and that's the way it went. And so the way that's gone into the brain and the way that person's behaved, just from all that stuff that's affecting that, all those sensory things.
And I think this is one of the things, you realise when you have a child as well, is that the language that we use and the way that we, impress upon those children is so important.
Absolutely.
And it kind of teaches you to be a better leader and a better manager, I think, because it does reinforce, that like my son will replay things back to me. I think, how's he learned that? He's just said exactly my words. And it definitely, it picks you up on the things that you maybe don't even realize that you're doing. So even if you're saying things about, I might say something about dieting, or, oh, I don't want to eat that cake because it's not good for me, or whatever it is, and then you hear them saying that back, what message is that giving?
Absolutely. It's a subtext sometimes, isn't it? It's the things that you say, is that generally that subconscious stuff that you're thinking about, and sometimes you then act upon it or you articulate it in that way. I might have shared with you before, but the way I got into NLP was because I had a phenomenal HR director many moons ago, and a guy called Pete, and we'd always, all of us, a team about 35 of us, operational HR, whenever you went into his room and you came out, you'd go in with a problem and you came out with a solution, and he wouldn't say it, he would not give you the answers to that issue. And at the time I was mobilising quite a difficult contract, and he was down in Norfolk, I was up in Lincolnshire, so I didn't see him that often. But you'd go to his office and you'd go with all those problems, the external stuff coming in left, right and centre. I've got this grievance, I've got that, I've got all these staff who aren't going to turn up on Monday. And you go in, and I was fairly inexperienced at the time in that from a HR perspective, so there was less sort of knowledge to call upon. But what I did have was my behaviour and how I was going to respond to it. And you sometimes recall on those memories that you have from what you've done before and how it worked and how it didn't work. And you'd bring that to the table and you'd be articulating that to him in a way that, it's not going to work. I just know it's not going to work. I can just see there's going to be a problem with this. I've got a really bad feeling. And all that language that you use, that bad feeling, is all that stuff that you're putting through your brain, isn't it? All that filter stuff. It's that value and belief stuff you hold, and subconsciously I'm probably thinking, I just don't know why we've mobilised this contract. I think it's a waste of money, waste of time, waste of energy. I've been given a bad job here to do. And you'd go out the room and you'd just be like, wow, I've come out with so many answers and I've just done it myself. And you'd reprogram, you'd naturally use the NLP techniques to remap and have that sort of genuine cathartic coaching conversation to get you to think about what's going in, how are you distorting all that information that's going in, what things are you bringing into the mix, your own personal baggage and beliefs and memories that you're calling upon, and then come away with a solution. And it was, and of course when we all went on the training, it was like, this is exactly what this guy is doing. So it's so powerful.
It is. And I think, like with that generalization, what we don't even realize we're doing it to ourselves. So it's like when you try something new and you fail and you go, okay, well, I'll give it another go, and it fails. And you go, well, I'm not trying that again because it's failed twice. And so I guarantee it'll fail the next time. So if you do try it again, it will fail because you've told yourself, I believe it will fail. And
as
that's
a 4-year-old
where,
learning to Sorry, I interjected.
No, go on, go for it.
But as a 4-year-old learning to ride a bike, you don't have so much of that resilience, do you? You don't have so many of those memories. So you'll fall off once, you'll fall off twice, and maybe by the 5th time, we're going through it now with our eldest, the stabilizer off and you're going for it. But you haven't had so many of those knockbacks. You've not got so many of those bad memories that are stopping you. But the older you get and that memory bank's growing, and all those values and beliefs as well, that I know I can hurt myself here, or I've got a friend who broke their leg falling off their bike, or I heard about that woman who fell off the roller coaster and this happened. And you face events very differently because your life experiences, don't you, and the knowledge and things that you've come across. Whereas as a child, you're still fairly innocent to some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even things that we, our parents do that where they think they're helping, can actually set bad behaviors as well. I was coaching someone recently who was saying that she had quite a lot of hang-ups because of what her dad, what her dad's expectations were. And she felt that she could never live up to them, even though he was probably very proud of her. But it was always the language that he used made her feel that she wasn't as confident.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of unpicking to say, actually, no, this is where you're at, and you need to not judge by others' expectations. It's, your perception, no one else's.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's generally a bad parent behind a lot of those coaching conversations. I think I've had
it's a lot of childhood trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. It's just, I think they recollect, and you can see it, can't them calling it from the memory bank, and it takes a while to get there. But the memories and just failing the 11 plus or not getting the GCSEs that they thought they were going to get, it's all stuff that then shapes and develops them, and subconsciously at the time might have not even bothered them. In fact, they might have gone through a rebellious period and not bothered doing the A levels and gone off to uni. They might have just done something they wanted to do, but subconsciously the language that has been used and the it's changed their values and beliefs at that point, hasn't it? And it's certainly had a memory for them, which has a huge impact then on how they then operate and deal with challenges as adults as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's a lot of triggers in there. And when I think back to my childhood, I experienced some bullying, and I know that I have triggers when I see that happening to other people, or there's certain things that will be triggered by those personal values of memories that I had. And I think when I said at the beginning about the NLP principle of the map is not the territory, to kind of explain that a bit more as well, is that we assume everybody else thinks the same way that we do.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's we even the language that we use sometimes will say, oh, obviously. It might be obvious to me, but it's not obvious to you. And just things that are just a little bit just need a little bit more consideration before we actually talk about certain things.
I think that's so true, and I think it's every piece, isn't it? It's both professional and personal. And I think even in married life, someone you live with 24/7, I think you like to think you know them, but that map is so different, the way they deal with that and they process that external stuff. And it's particularly testing, isn't it, when you're faced with either forms of adversity and you kind of get to know it then, but a lot of people don't on the day-to-day kind of get to grips with that and take notice of it. You just my husband laughs at me because he said, you always blame everybody else. Like if your toast falls in the morning, it's someone else's fault. It's not my fault. And and I think, I don't actually ever hear him blame anybody else. It's as basic as that, isn't it? But you just walk by it on a day-to-day basis. And then for some people, it's when there's something really kind of meaty to deal with, as a family situation or a business situation or personal. And then that kind of, again, it's like a ha-ha moment, isn't it? You're like, I do understand now that we're not seeing this on the same page. And I think for many years that I struggled with that. I think it wasn't until I hit probably 30, because I used to like to think that my friends around me and the people that I'd forged close relationships with were people that I had really close values and beliefs and morals and principles with. And I'd look and I think they had very similar childhood to me and they had very similar beliefs. But actually, when it came to like sticky conversations or sticky things, we'd all deal with it slightly differently. But I had this like holistic approach that we're all, I'd picked my friends, I'd picked my relationships, and I actually picked very similar people in that sense. And so it was all fine. Yeah, and I soon realised actually that isn't the case, and life would be boring if we were the same, I guess, but we do assume where we are on that same map, don't we? Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, I said to you, one of the greatest revelations for me was having a conversation with my husband and saying that, through coaching, I'd realised I'm a very visual person. So
Yeah.
I see everything in pictures. So if I'm
Yeah.
going to describe my holiday, I would tell you about what the hotel looked like, the
Yeah.
weather, all the kind of small details that I am actually seeing in my head.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can see it
Yeah.
right now as I'm talking to you. And
Yeah.
I was explaining this to my husband and saying, how would you describe the holiday? And he kind of looked blankly at me and said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, but
Yeah.
what do you see when you're picturing us on holiday? What do you see?"
Yeah.
No, literally nothing. He
No.
just
No.
didn't engage. And
Yeah.
it was this light bulb moment of actually he's a very kinesthetic person,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's all about the feelings. So he would describe the holiday as, yeah, it was great. We went jet skiing, or we did this activity, or whatever it was, because he's so in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's this light bulb of all these years of
Yeah.
arguing where I'm saying, you can't
Yeah.
see my point of view. He literally can't.
There we go. We need to take it to market. They should put NLP as part of the Match.com film.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
make
but
ourselves rich, Laura.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
definitely.
so true. I think years ago I did some psychometrics, and my boyfriend at the time, it was years ago. Yeah, he came home and he was like, "Oh, this is a load of rubbish. This is, you're right up your street, load of psychology mumbo jumbo." We read it and I was like, "Yeah, we're so different," and I accepted that. We're in different careers, we're different personalities, but we had that. We were aware of the behaviours that went into the psychometrics. Yeah, but it wasn't until we did NLP that I soon realised it's not just that, it is those sensory pieces that are so important. And as Matt always says to me, "Why do you touch things?" He only said it at the weekend. We went in the shop. He's like, "Why are you touching it all?" And with COVID, it was a nightmare. He's like, "Why are you touching everything?" Because I'm so, I struggle with internet shopping for that, because it's a tactile piece. And like
Yeah,
you, I'm very visual. So yeah, having a FaceTime, I FaceTime my mum every day. I don't particularly need to see her face, but I want to know where she is. So she's
yeah,
in the caravan this week and she's gone to my favourite place. I'm like, "Oh, show me the picture on, and show me Woodbridge," and I need to see that, even though I know it. I've got
yeah,
memory of it in my head, very vivid memory from probably 25 years ago, but I want to see it now and see her there. So
yeah,
I can put her there and know that she's there, which is just, exactly that visual piece, isn't it? So
absolutely. And we see it so much in organizations as well, where,
yeah, yeah,
when people take on members of staff, they're like, I just don't understand. I can't get through to this person, or
yeah, yeah,
it's huge, that actual understanding of how do people think and how do people
absolutely.
view their world.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah, I've struggled actually. I've worked with people some people are very auditory before, and I do find that incredible. And even though, like, when you're trying to do learning styles, etc., in training, but it's just basic communication, isn't it? When you're having conversations with people and they're so different, and I'll be like, I see, language that you use, to the senior leadership team. I can see this, and this is where we're going to go, and I can see this is what the future's going to look like. And they're like, "Well, what does, from our perspective, well, we can't see that. We're not on that page." And it's very different, isn't it? Take people on that journey if they're not the same sensory process as you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, where as a coach, it's that,
Yeah,
matching where people are at, and pacing them, and then
absolutely.
being able to lead them to
Yeah,
understand your point of view,
yeah,
and being able to flex. And that's what I've
absolutely.
realized, with my
Yeah.
husband, is now I know what he thinks. I will try and I'll take him for a walk if I want to
Yeah,
speak to him,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
about something important, because he
yeah,
will engage more in doing an
absolutely.
activity.
Yeah, and that was something I pulled on with a coachee last week, actually. She's fairly new to line manager, and she's got somebody who's similar age to her that she's working with, and they're getting a really good rapport, but clearly very different experiences and perceptions of this line management appointment. And we just literally went through the sentences, and the way she was describing everything, it's very, 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 very visual. She'll tell me in the week what she's done and what she's seen, and I went for a dog walk and I did this, and we went on holiday and this is what we saw. And the penny dropped that the person she was trying to manage wasn't. So we had exactly that conversation. Sometimes to have those honest conversations, take them for a walk, have a conversation with them, making sure they're hearing what you're saying, give them those examples. And it's so important for people to understand that, isn't it? It's so important because it's so powerful.
Yeah,
It's not,
absolutely. Yeah.
it's I think, yeah, I certainly was very ignorant to that for many years, and just I think you kind of bounce through life, don't you, and in your 20s, and then when relationships change and you've worked with people over the years, and you've kind of lick your war wounds, don't you, to some of those management decisions you either make or the relationships you've had with people. And NLP just cements all of that, really. And I think, yeah, generally when you have those conversations as part of coaching, it's, as I always say, it's the aha moments. Yeah, that's the only way I can describe it. People just go, yeah, I get that now. That makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always the bits where, I was speaking to someone just earlier today, actually, about, where they wanted to be and what their goals were. And
Yeah.
their words they were saying was, oh, I have the answers. I know you're telling me things I already know.
Yeah.
And it is that holding a mirror up to someone
Yeah.
and saying, actually, you do know what you want to do.
Yeah.
But how are you going to implement that? How are you going to get there?
Yeah.
Because most people, it's quite uncomfortable to actually look in
Yeah.
the mirror.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's the same thing. We don't do it unless we're being coached, and we have to, and we're
Yeah.
forced into that position. And that's only
100%.
where the change happens.
100%. And if people can get this, when an external environment of rental piece goes into their brain, there's 200 million pieces that they've got to process, all the various things that go on in that brain to then give the output behaviour. If they just know, they don't need to know the theory, and I certainly don't, let's say, don't like to talk too much about the theory, but if they understand some of those basic principles, how they behave, how they offshoot some of that stuff is so powerful, and it changes, doesn't it? Like you say, if they know they want to be in a certain place and they want to grow the business, or they want to take on employees and start leading people, all that stuff as it goes in, those values, beliefs, previous experiences, good, bad, the ugly, all goes into the mix, doesn't it? And like you say before, the element of the generalization, the distortion, it all goes into play. And if they just know 2 or 3 of those snippets and how to impact that behavior on the way out, we probably need to talk about the drama triangle in another session, because that again is a huge thing, isn't it, that really help people as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's we've got our next podcast topic there.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I hope, for anybody listening, that's given you a little bit of an insight into, the very basic model. And obviously we could talk all day, but if anyone has any kind of feedback or wants any suggestions on future topics, please do get in touch. The next podcast will certainly be the drama triangle.
Absolutely. And I think if we share the model, literally we'll give you the model and you think about a scenario that you've been dealt with in the last week and put that through the model, and it'll be the aha moment that you'll get and take away hopefully from this podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, guys. See you on the next one.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We rely heavily on word of mouth, so if you found value in this episode, please hit subscribe and share it with family and friends. If you'd like to find out a bit more about us, you can find us on our Facebook group, Parentrepreneurs Club, or alternatively on Instagram, Parentrepreneurs_Club. We hope you have a great week, and we look forward to talking to you next time.